First contact gone wrong. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance hung suspended in space, a crystalline structure that housed the greatest minds of 50 spacefaring civilizations. Today, those minds were gripped by fear. High Counselor Zixtal, their most celebrated military strategist, projected the latest battle footage above the central podium. The hologram showed sleek crystalline ships, Nexari vessels, tearing through the Alliance's most advanced warships as if they were made of paper. The Nexari moved with perfect synchronization, their ships combining and separating like liquid mercury, adapting to every defensive formation the Alliance threw at them. The Centauri defense grid has fallen, Zixtal announced, his translucent tentacles rippling with distress. That's the 12th major system lost in 2 lunar cycles. The Nexari are perfect. They learn, they adapt, they evolve mid-battle. Our most sophisticated AI cannot predict their patterns because they have none. They are chaos incarnate. From her observation pod, Ambassador Clara of the Sylphid Confederation raised her luminescent wings in protest. Surely our combined technological superiority has failed us, interrupted Council Elder Morn, his ancient scaled face reflecting the harsh light of the battle footage. The Nexari possess no technology we can understand. Their ships appear to operate on principles that defy our physics. They've countered every weapon, every strategy, every defense we've developed over 10,000 years of space warfare. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, each representative offering increasingly desperate solutions. Clara watched them with mounting despair. The Alliance had always prided itself on its orderly, logical approach to warfare. Their battles were like elaborate games of strategy, each move calculated to mathematical perfection. But the Nexari, they were something else entirely. There might be another option, came a quiet voice from the far corner of the chamber. The room fell silent as Chief Xenoanthropologist Dr. Venna stepped forward. Her small gray-skinned form seemed almost apologetic as she activated her own holographic display. 3 solar cycles ago, our deep space probes discovered a previously unknown spacefaring species, she began. We've been observing them since then, trying to understand their unique characteristics. The hologram showed a blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Earth, she continued, home to a species called humans. They've barely mastered interplanetary travel, their technology is crude, and their civilization is chaotic at best. But, she paused, manipulating the display to show various scenes from human history. They are unlike anything we've ever encountered. While we perfect single solutions, they generate thousands of imperfect ones. Where we seek order, they embrace chaos. Their military history is particularly fascinating. They've developed more unique ways of fighting in their brief existence than the Alliance has in millennia. The chamber watched in stunned silence as Dr. Venna displayed footage of human warfare through the ages. Guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, asymmetric combat. Concepts alien to the Alliance's ordered military doctrine. They're savages, Clara whispered, her wings dimming in horror as she watched humans turning their very limitations into advantages. Perhaps, Dr. Venna agreed, but they're savages who might understand our enemy better than we do. The Nexari's greatest strength is their unpredictability, their chaos. But humans swim in chaos. They breathe it. They thrive in it. High Counselor Zixtal's tentacles writhed thoughtfully. You're suggesting we contact them. Ask these humans for help. I'm suggesting we might not have a choice, Dr. Venna replied. The Nexari will reach their system eventually. Better to approach them now, on our terms, than to wait until they're drawn into this war anyway. Elder Morn leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the images of Earth. And what makes you think they would help us, or that they even could? Dr. Venna's next words sent a chill through the chamber. Because in all my years studying species across the galaxy, I've never seen one quite like humans. They possess something we don't fully understand. An ability to face impossible odds and somehow prevail. They call it human spirit, though that's an inadequate translation. She gestured to a final piece of footage, a human emergency responder rushing into a burning building to save a stranger. They're not logical. They're not predictable. They'll sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts like honor or duty. They'll fight battles they know they can't win, simply because they believe they should. And sometimes they win anyway. The chamber fell into contemplative silence. It was Clara who finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. So we're betting the survival of galactic civilization on a species that hasn't even unified their own planet. No, Dr. Venna corrected. We're betting on a species that has survived and thrived precisely because they never unified, because they never stopped challenging themselves, never stopped adapting. The Nexeri are perfect, yes, but humans are perfectly imperfect. And right now, that might be exactly what we need. High Counselor Zixtal absorbed the information in silence, his sophisticated mind running countless simulations. Finally, he spoke. Prepare a first contact team. If we're going to do this, we need to move quickly. The Nexeri have already taken the Arcturus sector. Earth's arm of the galaxy will be next. As the council chamber emptied, Dr. Venna remained behind, studying the image of Earth rotating slowly in the holographic display. May the stars help us all, she murmured. We're about to introduce chaos to combat chaos. The galaxy will never be the same. In the depths of space, unaware of the momentous decision that had just been made, humanity continued its daily struggles, its petty conflicts, its endless innovations. They had no idea that they were about to be thrust onto a galactic stage, or that their very imperfections might be the key to saving civilization itself. The first contact team was assembled within hours, a mix of diplomats, scientists, and military observers. Their mission was unprecedented, not to assess humans for eventual membership in the Alliance, but to recruit them as saviors. As their ship entered faster than light travel, Dr. Venna couldn't help but wonder if they were making the right choice. But as she reviewed her research one final time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Humans had a saying that seemed particularly appropriate. Desperate times call for desperate measures. They were about to find out just how desperate both sides could be. The human factor. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching the alien ship descend through Earth's atmosphere. It looked like a soap bubble made of starlight. Beautiful, delicate, and completely unlike the utilitarian vessels humans had designed for space travel. Their tech is at least 3 centuries ahead of ours, she muttered, more to herself than to the room full of military and civilian leaders behind her. And they're coming to us for help. That's what makes this situation so damn interesting, General Martinez replied, his weathered face reflected in the window beside her. The question is, what aren't they telling us? The Alliance delegation had made first contact 72 hours ago, broadcasting their message simultaneously to every major communication network on Earth. The footage of their ships arriving had united humanity in a way that no earthly crisis ever had. Nothing brings people together quite like discovering you're not alone in the universe. But it was their request for help that had really shocked everyone. Commander Chen, the general continued, you've been unusually quiet during the briefings. What's your assessment? Sarah turned from the window, facing the assembled leadership. She'd spent the last 3 days reviewing everything the Alliance had shared about the Nexeri threat. While others focused on the technological gap between humanity and their potential alien allies, she'd noticed something else. They're too perfect, she said finally. The Alliance, I mean. Everything about their civilization, their military doctrine, their technology. It's all built on precision, on perfection. And that's their weakness. She stepped to the holographic display, bringing up the battle footage the Alliance had shared. Look at how they fight. Mathematically perfect formations, optimal firing solutions, textbook maneuvers. And they're losing because the enemy adapts faster than their computers can calculate new solutions. And you think we can do better? Admiral Wong asked, skepticism heavy in his voice. With our primitive tech. Sarah smiled. Sir, what's the first thing they teach us about combat? No plan survives first contact with the enemy. The Admiral replied automatically. Exactly. These aliens, the Alliance, they're trying to perfect their plans. We know better. We've spent our entire history learning to improvise, to adapt on the fly, to embrace chaos, and make it work for us. She gestured to the battle footage. The Nexeri are beating them because they're unpredictable. But unpredictable, that's practically humanity's middle name. The room fell silent as her words sank in. It was Professor Helen Martinez from the Xenological Institute who spoke next. She's right. Look at human history. Our greatest achievements often came from breaking rules, thinking differently, trying the impossible simply because no one told us we couldn't. General Martinez stood, his expression thoughtful. Commander Chen, you've studied their tactical data. What would you do differently? Sarah manipulated the holographic display, highlighting a recent battle where an Alliance fleet had been decimated. First, we stopped trying to match their perfection. The Alliance fights like they're playing chess. We need to teach them to fight like they're in a bar brawl. She began laying out her ideas, and as she spoke, the room's skepticism gradually turned to interest. Her proposals were unconventional, even by human standards, mixing tactics from throughout human history with modern innovations that the Alliance's ordered minds had never considered. It's insane, Admiral Wong said finally, using civilian ships as decoys, intentionally displaying false weaknesses, attacking from positions of apparent disadvantage. It goes against every principle of modern warfare. Exactly, Sarah replied. That's why it might work. The Nexeri adapt to patterns, so we give them no patterns to adapt to. The alien ship had landed outside by now, its crystalline surface refracting sunlight across the courtyard. In less than an hour, humanity would give the Alliance their answer. General Martinez stood. Commander Chen, you'll lead the human contingent. Pick your team, anyone you want, military or civilian. The Alliance is offering us access to their technology, but we're doing this our way. Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Sir, request permission to bring along some unusual specialists. Granted. What kind of specialists? To start with, a chess grandmaster, a chaos theory mathematician, and a stage magician. The room erupted in confused murmurs, but Sarah continued. The chess master understands strategy, but knows when to sacrifice pieces for position. The mathematician understands how small changes can have massive consequences. And the magician. She smiled. The magician understands that sometimes the best way to win is to make your opponent watch the wrong hand. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah remained behind, studying the holographic battle footage. The Alliance had spent millennia perfecting their civilization, creating order from chaos. Now they needed humans to bring a little chaos back into the equation. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had spent its entire existence striving for greater order, greater control. Now they were being called upon precisely because they hadn't achieved it. Outside, the alien ship pulsed with soft light, waiting for Earth's response. In a few hours, Sarah and her unconventional team would board that ship, heading out to fight an enemy that had defeated the most advanced civilization in known space. The odds were impossible. The challenge seemed insurmountable. The logical move would be to decline, to let humanity remain safe in its cosmic backwater until the Nexeri eventually found them. But humans had never been very good at being logical. Sarah checked her watch. She had 3 hours to recruit her team and prepare for departure. It wasn't much time to prepare for a mission that might determine the fate of multiple civilizations. But then again, humanity had always done its best work under pressure. Unconventional warfare. The Alliance flagship Eternal Symmetry hung in space like a perfect crystal, its bridge crew watching in barely concealed horror as Commander Sarah Chen outlined her battle plan. You want to do what? High Admiral Vector's translucent form rippled with disbelief. "We're going to lose," Sarah said calmly, standing before the three-dimensional tactical display. Her unusual team flanked her: Dr. Maya Patel, the chaos mathematician; Marcus Wong, the chess grandmaster; and James "Amazing" Anderson, the stage magician, each studying the display with different but equally intense expressions. "That's your strategy. Deliberate defeat." Vector's voice carried the edge of someone questioning their life choices. "No," Sarah smiled. "That's our opening move. The Nexeri have never lost. They've never needed to learn from failure because they've always succeeded. We're going to teach them how to lose, and in doing so, we're going to teach them fear." Maya stepped forward, her hands dancing through the holographic display. "The Nexeri operate on pattern recognition and adaptation, but they've only ever needed to adapt to success. Their algorithms have no framework for processing failure." "Think of it like a chess game," Marcus added. "Sometimes you sacrifice your queen to set up a checkmate. The Nexeri have never played against someone willing to lose pieces strategically." The Alliance officers exchanged troubled looks. Their entire military doctrine was built around minimizing losses, optimizing every engagement. The idea of intentionally losing was more alien to them than humans themselves. But they had run out of options. "Very well," Vector said finally. "The 7th Fleet is yours to command, Commander Chen. May the stars forgive us." The next 12 hours were a flurry of preparation. Sarah's team worked with Alliance engineers to modify their ships in ways that made the aliens deeply uncomfortable. They were deliberately introducing imperfections into their perfect systems. James Anderson, the magician, proved surprisingly valuable in this phase. "Misdirection isn't about what you show," he explained while helping to redesign the fleet's energy signatures. "It's about creating a story your audience wants to believe." The Nexeri arrived exactly when predicted, their liquid metal ships flowing through space like Mercury. They moved with their usual perfect coordination, forming up to engage the Alliance fleet. Sarah watched them approach, her expression unreadable. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. The Alliance fleet moved to engage, but something was wrong. Their formations were sloppy, their responses delayed. Ships fired at suboptimal angles, their shots going wide. To the Alliance observers, it looked like complete amateur hour. The Nexeri responded exactly as expected, their ships flowing into optimized attack patterns to exploit the apparent weaknesses. Their first strike cut through the Alliance lines like a hot knife through butter, destroying 3 ships instantly. "Continue retreat," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the deaths she'd just witnessed. "Make it look desperate, but not total." "Maya." Dr. Patel's fingers flew across her console, pattern forming exactly as predicted. "They're committing more forces to exploit what they perceive as systemic weaknesses." The battle continued, the Alliance forces appearing to fight desperately but ineffectively. The Nexeri pressed their advantage, their ships advancing in ever more aggressive formations. "They're fully committed," Marcus observed, studying the tactical display like a chessboard. "They've never encountered an opponent that didn't fight at peak efficiency. They don't understand the concept of holding back." Sarah nodded. "Now for the real magic trick, James." The magician grinned. "Watch this." At Sarah's command, the retreating Alliance fleet suddenly shifted. Ships that had appeared damaged shed their false energy signatures. Formations that had seemed chaotic snapped into completely unexpected patterns, and from the debris field of their own destroyed vessels emerged a dozen stealth ships, their systems specifically modified to hide among the wreckage. The Nexeri fleet had never encountered such a dramatic shift in battle tactics. Their adaptive algorithms struggled to process the sudden change, creating a fatal moment of confusion. "All ships, execute attack pattern Chaos 3, Sarah ordered. The Alliance fleet struck from multiple vectors, their attacks purposefully varied in timing and approach. Some ships used full power, others reduced output, creating an unpredictable rhythm of assault that the Nexeri couldn't adapt to fast enough. "It's working," Maya announced, excitement creeping into her professional tone. Their response patterns are degrading. They can't identify a consistent strategy to counter. The Nexari ships began to move erratically, their perfect coordination faltering as their adaptive systems tried to account for too many variables at once. Some ships attempted to retreat while others pressed forward, their legendary unity shattered. "Keep the pressure on," Sarah commanded. "Random attack patterns only. Don't give them anything to adapt to." The battle that followed was unlike anything the Alliance had ever seen. The human-led fleet fought like drunken masters, their attacks appearing chaotic, but achieving devastating results. The Nexari, for the first time in their existence, began to make mistakes. When it was over, the Nexari had retreated, leaving behind several destroyed ships, the first significant losses they'd ever suffered. The Alliance crew stared at their tactical displays in stunned silence. "How?" Vector asked finally. "How did you know this would work?" Sarah looked at her team before responding. "Because humans understand something that both the Alliance and the Nexari have forgotten. Perfection is predictable. And predictability, in warfare, is fatal." Maya stepped forward, pulling up the battle analysis. "More importantly, we've just introduced a new element into their adaptive algorithms: failure. They'll need to completely restructure their response patterns to account for this possibility." "We haven't won the war," Marcus cautioned, "but we've changed the game. They can no longer assume that superior adaptation equals certain victory." James nodded. "We've shown them that sometimes what looks like weakness is actually strength. That's going to make them question everything they think they know about us." Sarah turned to Vector. "This was just the beginning. Now that we've taught them they can lose, we're going to teach them to fear what comes next." The Alliance Admiral studied the humans with new respect. Perhaps, he thought, there was something to be said for imperfection after all. The breaking point. The war room aboard the Eternal Symmetry had changed dramatically in the 2 months since Sarah Chen and her team had taken command. Gone were the pristine holographic displays showing perfect battle formations. Instead, the walls were covered with a chaotic mix of human-style tactical boards, mathematical models, and what looked suspiciously like magic show props. "They're learning," Maya announced, studying the latest battle data. "The Nexari are attempting to incorporate randomness into their strategies." Sarah nodded, watching the replay of their most recent engagement. The Nexari ships have begun to show elements of unpredictability, though their attempts at chaos still followed subtle patterns that Maya's chaos algorithms could detect. "They're trying to beat us at our own game," Marcus observed from his station, where he was plotting potential battle scenarios like elaborate chess matches. "But they're approaching chaos mathematically, trying to calculate the perfect way to be imperfect." "Which is exactly what we wanted them to do," Sarah replied, a grim smile on her face. "James?" The magician looked up from where he was practicing card tricks, a habit that had initially baffled the Alliance crew, but had led to several breakthrough strategies. "They're watching the wrong hand again, Commander. While they've been studying our battle tactics, they've completely missed the bigger deception." The door chimed, and High Admiral Vector entered, his crystalline form dimmer than usual with fatigue. The war was taking its toll on everyone, even the seemingly indestructible Alliance species. "Commander Chen, we've received reports from the Arcturus sector. The Nexari are massing for what appears to be a major offensive. Our analysts suggest they're planning to strike at multiple targets simultaneously." "No," Sarah said, studying the intelligence reports. "That's what they want us to think." "Maya, run the numbers." The mathematician was already ahead of her, her fingers dancing across her specialized chaos mapping interface. "The fleet movements. They're too obvious. The Nexari know we can detect them. These are deliberate patterns meant to." She trailed off, her eyes widening. Oh, they're good." "What is it?" Vector demanded. "It's a double blind," Marcus answered, seeing the same thing Sarah and Maya had. "They're showing us obvious fake patterns to hide their real fake patterns, thinking we'll see through the first layer and think we've outsmarted them." James laughed. like a magician who lets you catch them in a small trick to distract from the big one. They're learning, but not fast enough, Sarah said. She moved to the central tactical display, bringing up a map of the sector. They still don't understand that true chaos isn't about layers of deception. It's about embracing uncertainty itself. She turned to Vector. Admiral, I need every ship you can give me, and I need them within the next 6 hours. The Admiral's crystalline form pulsed with concern. The Nexari fleet outnumbers us 3-1, possibly more if our intelligence is incomplete, even with your unconventional tactics. Those odds are exactly what we need, Sarah interrupted. They're expecting us to either fall for their obvious trap or to see through it and avoid the sector entirely. They're not expecting us to do something completely irrational, which is, we're going to attack them head-on. No tricks, no deception, no clever strategies, just a straightforward brute force assault. The room fell silent. Even Sarah's team looked surprised. That's suicide, Vector said finally. That's humanity, Sarah corrected. Maya, show them the simulation. The mathematician pulled up a complex model showing probability clouds and chaos patterns. The Nexari have adapted to expect deception from us now. They've restructured their entire tactical approach around trying to predict our unpredictability. But in doing so, they've created a new pattern, Marcus finished. Their countermeasures are themselves becoming predictable. James stepped forward, finally setting aside his cards. In magic, there's something called the double lift. It's such a basic trick that advanced magicians often avoid it because everyone expects it. But sometimes the obvious play is the one no one expects, Sarah concluded, especially from an opponent who's proven themselves capable of complex deception. Vector studied the humans for a long moment. Over the past 2 months, he'd learned to trust their bizarre insights, even when they seemed to defy logic. Very well, you'll have your fleet, but the Council will want to know our chances of success. Sarah exchanged looks with her team before responding. If we were fighting this battle the Alliance way, with precise calculations and optimal strategies, our chances would be exactly 0. But we're going to fight it the human way. And what are our chances then? Admiral, Sarah smiled. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to ignore the odds completely and do the impossible anyway. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Sarah's plan was audacious to the point of insanity. The Alliance fleet would split into 3 groups. One to engage the Nexari's obvious decoy fleet, one to counter their hidden real fleet, and one, led by Sarah, to do something so completely unexpected that even her own team wasn't sure it would work. As the fleet prepared for battle, Maya approached Sarah privately. Commander, I've run every possible simulation. What you're proposing, it shouldn't work. It can't work. That's exactly why it might, Sarah replied. The Nexari based their entire civilization on the idea that everything can be calculated, predicted, and controlled. We're about to show them that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is pure, irrational human stubbornness. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries to come. The Alliance fleet engaged exactly as Sarah had planned, throwing conventional tactics completely aside. Ships performed maneuvers that their designers had specifically said were impossible. Crews ignored safety protocols, pushing their vessels far beyond normal operational limits. And in the midst of it all, Sarah led her strike force on what appeared to be a suicidal charge directly into the heart of the Nexari formation. The Nexari, for the first time in their existence, hesitated. Their adaptive algorithms couldn't process the sheer irrationality of what they were witnessing. By the time they realized that sometimes the simplest answer was the correct one, it was too late. The battle wasn't just a victory. It was a complete paradigm shift in the way war would be waged across the galaxy. The Nexari suffered their worst defeat in history, not because they were outgunned or outmaneuvered, but because they had encountered something their perfect adaptability couldn't handle: human logic. As the surviving ships regrouped, Vector found Sarah on the bridge, staring out at the debris-strewn battlefield. "How did you know?" he asked simply. Sarah watched a piece of Nexeri ship drift past, its perfect surface finally shattered. "Because sometimes, Admiral, the best way to win isn't to be better or smarter or more advanced. Sometimes, you just have to be willing to do what your enemy considers impossible." Victory through chaos. The Grand Council chamber was nearly unrecognizable. Where once perfect order had reigned, now organized chaos prevailed. Holographic displays showed battle footage alongside human art, mathematical equations shared space with magic trick diagrams, and Alliance military officers mingled with Sarah's expanding team of human specialists. "The Nexeri have withdrawn to their core systems," High Counselor Zixtal announced, his tentacles moving in agitated patterns. "But our intelligence suggests they're planning something unprecedented." Sarah stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by her original team and the dozen other humans who'd joined their effort over the past 3 months. The Alliance had finally embraced the human approach fully, incorporating everything from Earth's military history into their strategy. "They're desperate," Maya said, studying the chaos patterns in the Nexeri fleet movements. "Their entire worldview has been shattered. Everything they believed about warfare, about adaptation, about perfection. We've proven it all wrong. Which makes them more dangerous than ever," Marcus added, his chess master's mind seeing the potential moves ahead. "They're backed into a corner, and they know they can't beat us conventionally anymore." James looked up from where he was teaching the young Alliance officer card tricks, part of his ongoing effort to help their allies understand human deception techniques. "They're going to try something big. One final trick to turn the tables." Sarah nodded, studying the tactical display. The Nexeri had consolidated their remaining forces around their homeworld, a mysterious planet that had never been successfully scanned or surveyed. Their ships had formed a defensive shell that was both perfect in its geometry and utterly incomprehensible in its purpose. "They're not preparing for defense," she said finally. "This is something else." "Maya, what do your chaos algorithms say?" The mathematician frowned at her displays. "The patterns, they're not just random. They're accelerating, growing more complex exponentially. It's like they're building up to some kind of singularity," Dr. Venna finished. The xenoanthropologist who had first suggested contacting humans had become a key member of their team, helping bridge the gap between human and Alliance thinking. "They're attempting to create a controlled chaos event." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The concept of controlled chaos was one that humans had introduced to the Alliance. But this was something different, something bigger. "They're trying to weaponize chaos itself," Sarah realized. "They've studied our tactics, our thinking, our willingness to embrace disorder. Now they're attempting to perfect it, to turn it into something they can control." "Can they do that?" Vector asked, his crystalline form dimming with concern. "No," Maya said firmly. "That's the point they still don't understand. True chaos can't be controlled or perfected. It can only be surfed." James finished with a grin. "Like a wave. You don't control it, you ride it." Sarah moved to the central display, her mind racing. The Nexeri were about to make their final play, and it would either be their masterpiece or their undoing. Everything hinged on whether they had truly learned from their encounters with humanity, or if they were still trapped in their old patterns of thinking. "They're going to try to create a perfect chaos engine," she announced. "Something that generates controlled, predictable unpredictability. And when they activate it, it'll tear reality apart." Maya whispered, her calculations painting a terrifying picture. "They'll destroy everything in their attempt to perfect imperfection." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Nexeri had taken humanity's greatest strength, our ability to thrive in chaos, and were attempting to turn it into a universe-ending weapon. "So how do we stop them?" Vector asked. Sarah looked at her team, each member representing a different aspect of human unpredictability. the mathematician who understood chaos' underlying patterns, the chess master who knew when to break the rules, the magician who understood that sometimes the best deception was no deception at all. "We don't stop them," she said finally. "We let them do it." The protest was immediate and loud, but Sarah held up her hand. The Nexari still think like the Nexari. They believe they can create perfect chaos, control it, weaponize it. But what happens when you try to perfect something that, by its very nature, defies perfection? Maya's eyes widened as she ran the calculations. It collapses. The more they try to control it, the more truly chaotic it becomes, Marcus finished. Like trying to force a specific outcome in chess, the harder you try, the more opportunities you create for your opponent. "Exactly," Sarah said. "They're going to build their chaos engine, thinking they can control it. But true chaos, human chaos, isn't about control. It's about adaptation, improvisation, and most importantly, letting go," James added quietly. Sarah nodded. "We're going to let them activate their weapon, but when they do, we'll be ready with something they'll never expect." "What's that?" Vector asked. "Nothing," Sarah smiled. "Absolutely nothing. No clever tactics, no complex strategies, no attempts to counter or control. We'll face their perfect chaos with pure human-style acceptance of the unpredictable. And in doing so, we'll let chaos be chaos," Maya finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Nexari activated their chaos engine, a massive construct that bent reality itself, generating waves of controlled unpredictability that they thought would finally give them the advantage over the human-led fleet. But Sarah had positioned her forces in a formation that made no sense, followed no pattern, and attempted no defense. When the chaos waves hit, instead of trying to resist or control them, the human-led fleet simply rode them. The Nexari watched in horror as their perfect weapon backfired spectacularly. The more they tried to control the chaos, the more it slipped through their grasp. Their attempts to perfect imperfection created a feedback loop that their systems couldn't handle. In the end, it wasn't superior technology or clever tactics that won the war. It was humanity's fundamental understanding of something the Nexari never could grasp. That true strength lies not in perfecting chaos, but in accepting it, embracing it, and dancing with it. The Nexari civilization didn't fall that day. Sarah made sure of that. Instead, they learned perhaps the most important lesson any species could learn, that perfection isn't about eliminating chaos, but about finding beauty in imperfection itself. Years later, in that same council chamber, Dr. Venna would explain to a new generation of Alliance scientists why they had really needed humans. "We thought we needed them for their unpredictability, their chaos," she said. "But what we really needed was their humanity, their ability to look into the face of impossible odds, laugh, and say, 'Watch this.'" And somewhere out in the galaxy, a new fleet of ships patrolled the stars. Some perfect crystalline Alliance vessels, some liquid metal Nexari crafts, and more than a few ugly, practical human ships. Together, they represented something entirely new, a civilization that had learned to balance order and chaos, perfection and improvisation, calculation and instinct. It wasn't perfect, but then again, that was exactly the point.